People tend to think of theme park design as like this really narrow thing. A, they don't necessarily consider it art, which it absolutely is. And B, they don't really realize how old that discipline is.
Hi, and welcome back to my channel. It's me, Lauren, filmmaker extraordinaire, and today I'm so excited to be introducing my friend Kira from Theme Park Concepts. She literally has a master's degree in themed entertainment. I do not have a master's degree, but I do love theme parks, amusement parks, etc. And I really love talking to her about this stuff, so hopefully you guys enjoy our conversation. Hi, Kira. Thank you so much for joining. Would you give the masses a brief intro about yourself?
Sure. My name's Kira. I work in immersive entertainment. Huge theme park fan. Have a master's in theme entertainment design, and I'm really happy to be here.
Obviously, I'm repping my little Disney ears, but we will be talking about theme parks beyond Disney because they do actually exist. I've been to both Universals and two Disneys. So no theme parks outside of the US. But you have been to theme parks outside of the US,
I
correct?
have. I've been to a few, not that many, but a few. Yeah, I've been to Puy de Fou in France, Disneyland in Paris, and then Efteling, which is in the Netherlands, which is an amazing park that we can talk more about later. But yeah, there's theme parks all over the world. It's certainly Disney and Universal are just the tip of the iceberg.
Would you say, just for me as an American and my mostly American audience, are they kind of similar when you go outside of the country, or does it like totally flip what we think of theme parks here on their heads?
I think it kind of depends on where you're going. I mean, the Universal and Disney resorts across the world are pretty similar to each other in terms of like, the kinds of entertainment they're offering. There's like small cultural differences, but it's not they're roughly the same product. I think it's when you get into like the more regional parks, like when you're talking about things in America, like Dollywood or Six Flags
Oh my God,
or
wait, I've been to Six Flags. I totally forgot. That counts as a theme park. Yeah, I've been to multiple Six Flags, and I've been to Dorney Park and Hershey Park.
Okay, yeah, so that's a few. When you start comparing those to some of the regional parks in Europe, Europe specifically, I think you start seeing some more differences. I think
Okay.
in America, there's a pretty sh strong delineation between an amusement park versus a theme park, and like those things mix less than they do in Europe, where you kind of get more blurred lines a lot of the time.
I would say like Dorney Park and Hershey Park are amusement parks then, right? Because they don't
Uh,
have
I'm
any
actually not
character.
I'm actually not familiar with Dorney Park,
I
but
I
Hershey
went
Park.
with I'm pretty sure I went with a school trip. Anyone else in the Northeast, those good old music trips where you play one song and then, you know, go on rides the rest of the day. So is a theme park when there's like characters and an amusement park is
So I
theme.
mean, ultimately, I mean, you can probably like spend a good like dissertation trying to parse out the differences. But I mean, I think the general rule of thumb is that a theme park is ultimately going to be centered around story and a theme. And I'm talking more of like a literary theme, not just like like you might have I know you might have like a Haunted Mansion birthday party, but that's more decorations and stuff. I'm talking about more like there's an actual story and there's a point to it. There's a message. So like if you're talking about Disneyland, it's not only very like themed to Disney properties, but there's like an undergoing narrative of optimism and hope in the future and those kind of things. Versus amusement parks tend to just be focused on thrills and sensation seeking and are don't usually tiptoe too much into that. At best, you'll get something like like a superhero put on the marquee of a roller coaster, and now all of a sudden it's a themed coaster, but you don't
Oh,
usually get fully into that storytelling.
that's a really good point. I don't think I ever actually like really thought about that. I just thought that was like something only Disney and Universal had versus
What,
like a different
I'm
type
sorry.
of park.
Yeah, there's actually lots of theme parks that really lean heavily into the storytelling. In America, you've got things like Dollywood and Silver Dollar City, and then you have Knott's Berry Farm out here on the West Coast. And there's like a smattering of other ones in there as well. The former Anheuser-Busch parks tend to focus on wildlife. So there's a decent amount of parks in the United States, and even smaller ones that we haven't mentioned either. Maybe that don't qualify as like a full park, but like smaller entertainment center or something like that that are pseudo theme parks.
I actually didn't know that at all. That's crazy. I also just realized I never went to Knott's Berry Farm when I was on the West
I,
Coast.
I tried to persuade you.
I know, I know. So maybe I'll have to do that on a visit. Something that Kira and I were discussing offline, which one of the reasons I was inspired, like I have to get you on my channel, was that we were talking about environments like beyond rides itself. And I was thinking about specifically the Peter Pan line at Disney World in Florida, how they had like redone it from when I was little. So the last time I was there, it was like way more engaging as I was like in line. And obviously, I think with like Star Wars Land, does Star Wars Land have a name or is it just Star Wars Land?
It is Galaxy's Edge.
Galaxy's Edge. Okay, that right.
The actual name of the land and universe is Batu.
That
It's,
too. Okay.
it's
So
a
like,
Black
there's
Spire outpost at Galaxy's Edge in Batu. There's a lot of different names going on there versus like compared to the story names versus the like the theme park
right.
attraction names.
But like I feel like those are two kind of different examples of like the whole you're suddenly in a whole immersive area versus you entered like a specific spot, but you're suddenly doing something more than just standing in line.
Mhm.
And would you say that you think more parks should focus on just my personal opinion question on the overall environment or like those kind of specific line engagement environments and which make the guests happier?
I mean, it's interesting that you bring that up because, like the entire history of sort of theme parks, the modern history of theme parks, we can go more into like the history of the discipline and how they're actually kind of a couple thousand years old. But
Really?
there's always been a trend towards making things more immersive, more entertaining. Starting in like I don't know, I'd say probably around the 70s-ish, we start seeing like the line itself becoming part of the attraction, and then in the 90s that like really accelerates. And I mean, certainly from where I'm coming from, I want the most immersive like thing you can possibly have, whether it's the environment you're in or the line,
Hmm.
or the actual ride. I want it everywhere. But I think when you start getting into the realities of actually having to build something out of steel and concrete, particularly when you're not a Disney or a Universal. Those things are really expensive, and ultimately, as much as it pains me, the themed entertainment is ultimately a business, right? That has to be profitable in order to keep existing, and
Yeah.
so there's there ends up being to be hard choices there of like where is the dollar best spent in the guest experience? Does it make sense to spend more money on the outside to give like a better photo op and sort of like carry the story out into the theme park, which might be a better storytelling perspective. But at the same time, if you're doing that, you're taking money away from the inside of the attraction, and that attraction might now be shorter, might be less impressive. You might have to cut, really cool special effects. So that's a really hard calculus, and I think every design firm and even project within like even if you're looking at just like one specific company, they make that decision kind of on a case by case basis, and sometimes it turns out really well, and sometimes there's a lot of shoulda, coulda, wouldas. But I think that's one of the harder things about actually doing it in practice versus doing it just in theory.
It's interesting that you say like for a photo op because I definitely fall like victim to like, oh, the photo op, we have to get the photo, we have to get the photo. I mean, I enjoy photos, so like I understand this appeal, but I didn't really think about like when I get my photo op, that's coming at the cost of something else.
Yeah, everything is always at the cost of something else, and there's a whole discipline inside themed entertainment called value engineering, which is not nearly as fun as it sounds. It's when someone pitches like this amazing concept, and then someone looks at the sticker price and like that's going to cost you $10 billion, and we want to do it for $1 million. And so then a bunch of people have to go through and strip things out line by line from the script or from the scope, and that's not a fun process.
That feels like the value you're bringing it down. You're not bringing it up.
You're trying to maximize value.
Got it. Got it.
Out of the set bucket of money that you have, how can we get the most value out of that?
Speaking of like the most value out of it, do you think that Disney thinks that like the value of their semi-faulty but like famous ride is more important than like maybe redoing it to a way that would break less?
I mean, I think you're right in general that there's conflicting priorities there where like obviously people want to keep things like relevant and fresh and get new people to come into the park, but there's also things that people really, really love and are very attached to, myself included, that no one wants to see go, but at the same time, like maybe that's the only place that you can put something new. or there is a mechanical issue. There's a lot of issues with really older attractions not really being up to code if like you were going to build it today. And so I think that's a thing that people are often weighing. Older attractions tend not to be as accessible as modern
Oh, so it's like
attractions.
grandfathered in because of
Yeah, exactly. Anything, I mean, this goes for anything that's been built, up
and that's like the
until,
same with this chimney in this house right now. If they were to like redo the chimney, my dad says it would not be up to code, which is why we
yeah.
currently have not redone the chimney.
Yeah, and there's a lot of challenge there too, where so, in the case of a classic dark ride like Peter Pan or any of those attractions are really, really small footprints. And so if you were to actually try to put a new attraction in there, it's extremely difficult because those attractions aren't built to sort of modern, safety standards and modern accessibility standards and all those kind of things that you literally couldn't build a modern attraction in a space that small. And
Oh,
that's
are
I don't,
most dark
I
rides?
don't know if that's the truth for that specific attraction, but it's absolutely the case, like on a macro level.
I actually didn't realize that like a lot of dark rides are small. The only other like really dark ride I can think of is like the Mummy. Once you get past like the big entrance, that's dark. But actually, wait, that ride is small because you go backwards. You literally half the ride is you going back the way you just came.
I mean, the Mummy's like relatively big. It's a lot bigger than the classic Fantasyland rides or
But that's a
like the bus bar attractions as they tend to call them.
the what?
Um,
A bus far?
yeah, so that just comes that's a way of referring to like the traditional like old school sort of like Fantasyland dark rides or ghost trains in a fair. They're called bus bar rides because there's a physical rail that goes like through the middle of the track,
Oh, okay.
provides power to the vehicle, and there's like a little mechanism that pulls the car along those
Like a
tracks.
trolley.
I mean, they make little tiny like hairpin turns and whatnot, and so those are like the classic bus bar rides versus modern rides, which usually actually still have a bus bar, or multiple bus bars. But they tend to be a lot larger in scale and much more sophisticated.
Oh, you learn new things every day. So what would like a wooden roller coaster have that? Or is that like a totally different thing? Because that's like
I
a
wouldn't roller coaster. I mean, roller coasters are roller coasters, and roller coasters are honestly like in terms of ride systems are kind of in their own category because
okay.
all the other ride systems that are out there are, I think this is true, are powered in some manner, right? Whether it's a bus bar or a flume or linear induction or whatever cables.
Yeah.
There's like some motor that's pulling them across or pushing them through that attraction, versus roller coasters are usually entirely gravity based or mostly entirely gravity based.
Oh,
And that's I mean that's starting to change a lot in more modern roller coaster design. I think a lot of modern roller coasters will have multiple launches in them,
so
but
we're
still
just
the majority
falling,
of what that coaster is doing is
falling.
yeah.
That's not comforting at all. Oh my God. But sometimes they stop, like on the going up. So there must be power going up.
Yeah, I mean if you're talking about the actual like the chain lift or the launch, there's obviously power in those cases. Somehow you have to like introduce energy into the system,
Right.
but it's not being constantly controlled throughout the entire experience in the way that most other rides are.
So you can't like brake anywhere.
Right, exactly. Like a roller coaster can only stop in certain places that there are brakes on the track. And
Oh,
I mean, it depends on the coaster. There's usually multiple brake runs throughout a coaster, but like the vehicle could only stop in those points, and otherwise it's just gravity.
I don't know if that makes me feel better or worse that it can
Well,
stop.
I mean, there's a lot of safety planning that goes into that. That there's, I mean, there's a whole, discipline of like block systems and block designs that we probably don't have enough time to get into, but there's pretty like, sophisticated programming to make sure like collisions and any sort of like dangerous thing doesn't happen.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, I think I've told you in the past, but like I was used to be like really afraid of roller coasters ever since I went on oh no, now I don't even remember. It was like the one is it like was there a rock and roller coaster? Like a rock
There
roof?
is a rock and roller coaster that is in Florida, yeah.
Okay, that's the one that traumatized me for like 10 years. If I had known that there was no way to stop the coaster, I actually would not have gone on. And then for a long time, I thought wooden roller coasters were safer because you couldn't go upside down. Is that true?
I mean,
Potentially.
it is true that wooden roller coasters typically don't go upside down, at least like actual traditional wooden roller coasters that are mostly built out of wood. There have been attempts. There's a roller coaster that was built in the 90s called Son of Beast that did not last very long
Oh,
because this was not very comfortable. It had all sorts of issues. But there are a lot of more modern, they're called hybrid coasters where they typically will take an existing wooden roller coaster and then they'll strip out the track and then they'll put on a much like crazier steel track on top of the wooden supports and you can do all sorts of acrobatics
oh,
and it's kind of this hybrid where you sort of get the wooden sense that wooden coasters tend to be bumpier and tend to shake more and there's a lot because they're made out of wood there's a little bit of more chaos there than a steel coaster which tends to be more focused on smoothness and whatnot and there's
oh.
they're just different experiences.
I actually didn't realize that there were any like wooden hybrid coasters. Is
Yeah,
that
there's quite a
is that
few
a
of them
newer
now.
thing, or has that actually been around for a long time?
They're newer. I would say I don't know. I couldn't tell you when the first one came out, but it's more like the last 10, 15 years that they've been popping up.
Okay, okay. I wonder if I've ever been on one now.
I
Would
think
I
you
know?
probably
Is it
remember it.
obvious?
Yeah, yeah. Usually like the steel rails end up being painted some bright color on top of the wooden supports and
Okay.
usually very, very aggressive coasters that are extremely intense.
Okay, so probably not my mojo. Maybe.
Probably you'd know if you'd been on one.
Okay, okay. Yeah, the most intense roller coaster I've ever been on, I feel like, well, intense maybe is not even the right word, but the fastest was King Ka. So, yeah.
I mean,
And
that's
that
pretty
I
intense.
trained to get up to that point after my fear of roller coasters. I was going on like the mouse run or whatever, which
Mhm.
found out when we were at Disney last together that apparently it's a like a taken out of the box roller coaster.
Yeah, I mean, no attraction is like fully out of the box. I mean, but yeah, there are some sort of standard models that you can get, or more standard models.
Well, that blew my mind because I thought everything was like perfectly designed exactly for the space that it's in.
Yeah, and definitely not. I mean, it's like a budget thing, right? The usually the more money you have, the more money you can put into custom designs. And smaller companies or smaller budget projects will sometimes buy, quote unquote, off the shelf rides because they are sort of more turnkey and ready to go. There's a lot less development that has to go into that versus some when you're trying to do something completely from scratch.
Interesting. Kind of pivoting because it just occurred to me as my brain works. A lot of like theme parks, it feels like now also, maybe they always had this, but I like didn't notice because when I was a kid, my parents had no interest, so they guided where we were going. But I feel like there's also a lot of like arcade areas in theme parks now, in the sense that there's like some kind of like balloon popping or like dart thing if you win like a prize. I know they have those like Six Flags. I feel like I've seen that sort of like at Universal. There's sort of like the gamey
Yeah,
area.
the arcade
And
games are like the fair games. I mean,
yeah.
those go back a really, really long time to like, the history of sort of modern American amusement parks originating with things like Coney Island and Luna Park and those things.
Oh, so
And
those are actually
they're
older things. Those aren't newer things that have been
well, I
introduced.
mean, they're definitely there's newer implementations of them that are more interesting and more fun or like more themed. But the general concept of like a game that you pay money for, like there's a game of chance there, right? Those things are very, very old.
Yeah.
It's a modern implementation of them, and they're a great way to make money, right? It's a lot like a casino, right? There's a standard, sort of odds of winning right there that and you people pay quite a few dollars to play the game, and most of the time you're not going to have to give anything out. You're going to take more money in than you get, and really the business of theme parks. They're trying to extract cash from the guests like as often as they can, sometimes more aggressively than others. But usually the price of the ticket does not necessarily cover the full cost of operation. And so the things like merchandise sales and food and beverage and the arcade games and upsells and souvenir balloons and all those kind of things will
Right.
help add to the average guest spend, which means that the ticket price can be lower and make it both more appealing and also like to a degree more accessible.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because I feel like I didn't initially realize when I was first thinking like, oh, it's like when I first moved to California, even though now I'm not there anymore, I was like, oh, Disney and Universal, like they're really close. Like I should be able to go all the time. And then it's like, okay, but if you're going there, you either have to pay for parking or you got to pay somehow to get there. And then you have to eat. You have to eat. And theme park food is always so expensive. Where it feels like no reason. I mean, I know there's the reason, but it feels like it's so expensive and it's just sad. Like it's just sad because you're hungry, but then you see how much like something is, and it's like that's my dinner. And I don't usually mind in the moment, but I do usually regret later that I had like a giant pretzel for dinner or
On the one hand, it is unfortunate, and on the other hand, it's not unlike going to the movie theater or going to a ball game or a concert or whatever. There's anytime you're going to sort of that walled garden, they have the
or you're
ability to
trapped.
charge
Anywhere
more.
you're trapped, they will.
And I will say that theme parks tend not to get them off the hook, but they do tend to charge less for those kind of things than the movie theater does, or in the Dodgers game or whatever. They don't go into the $20 for a box of popcorn territory.
Yeah. No, if they went $20 into a box of popcorn, I think my parents would never have bought us any food at all. Disney be like, whatever food you can maybe bring yourself, and otherwise you're starving to death, like until you get back to the hotel later. Um, and that's if you can have a hotel. I feel like a lot of parks that I've been to are like day parks, mostly, I guess, thinking about like Six Flags, Torrey Park, Hershey Park, things near me in New Jersey. And like if you're in LA or in Florida, you could go to like a park a day. But some parks are like you just can't do them all in one day. Like you can't unless you do like for Disney, you could do like the park hopper pass. But it feels like there's just like a lot to see in one day. And Universal in LA, you feel like you can do in one day, but it seems like a lot bigger in Florida. So I don't know if you could do all of the park in one day. But
I would not recommend trying to do all four Disney parks or all three Universal parks in Florida in one day. I'm sure people have done it. I've done three. Um,
for Di
I
three
can't
Disney
I
parks.
can't recommend it. It's a lot.
I still feel like as someone who doesn't know that much about theme park design, but who likes theme parks, I feel like I still prefer like a big, it feels like in my brain, I feel like I'm getting more at a bigger park, even if I can't do everything, than when I do everything at a smaller park. Although I can also still feel like so happy to like check everything off the list. But I feel like that's maybe just like a psychological thing that I'm like getting more bang for my buck, even
Yeah,
if I've been going to all
it's
the
hard to
parks.
say. Like parks have like internal metrics of like what they want their guests to experience and like their internal metrics for like how many attractions someone has to experience before they think that they've, had a satisfying day. And I forget what that number is. And no park is ever going to actually tell the general public what their internal number is. But there is true that there is a number where, psychologically, like after you've hit, say it was 10 attractions, you feel like, oh yeah, I got my money's worth. And but there's a lot of nuance that goes into that. It's like, was it the attraction that you actually wanted to go on? And like how
Oh,
impressive was that attraction and how old was it? And all those kind of things can affect, your perception of your day. And parks really are designed to hit those metrics, right? So if a park has a lot of attractions or a park has only a few attractions, like there is math going on, behind the scenes on the spreadsheet to determine how many attractions they should actually have and like what kinds of attractions they should be so they can hit those kind of metrics. And it's as much as I would love theme park design to be entirely about the art of awe and storytelling, like all that is on top of like a base program that's designed so that their different market segments can be hit and served like in the way that they think that their guests need to be served in order to have like guest satisfaction and come back.
oh,
That's why you'll see attractions that are sort of stratify the ages. You have attractions that like old people would really like or like toddlers would like, but like the teens wouldn't. And then you have
right.
attractions that specifically like aggressively target teens. There's attractions that will have really like high capacity, and there's attractions that will have really low capacity. There's the quote unquote e-ticket attractions that will get built that they can put on a billboard and get people to come. And then there will also be like a lot of smaller attractions that no one would ever come to the park specifically for, like a merry-go-round or I don't know, some sort of like spinning ride, but nevertheless like help take people out of other queues and like make sure people think that they got their money's worth and that they had a good time.
Oh, that is so interesting. Though I would go just for the Winnie the Pooh ride. I feel like that's,
Well, everyone is different. That's one of the reasons why there is a diversity of attractions in most parks. Parks
correct
that don't have a diversity of attractions usually are targeting a specific demographic.
person.
I think we should talk a little bit about the sort of the history of theater entertainment design and that art discipline, if you want to go down that road.
Yeah, take it away.
Okay, so one of the things like I'm really passionate about, and a lot of people who do theme entertainment design for a living is people tend to think of theme park design as like this really narrow thing. A, they don't necessarily consider it art, which it absolutely is. And B, they don't really realize how old that discipline is. Sort of modern theme park design history kind of starts with Disneyland in the 1950s. I don't think anyone would dispute that, except maybe Knott's Berry Farm. They want to claim that title. But the actual discipline of that goes way, way further back. On the one hand, there's a couple different lineages there. There's like the history of amusement parks, which you go back at, a couple hundred years to like the first roller coasters. I think the current theory is they kind of originated in Russia with people like sliding down mountains on sleds, which turned into later sort of these like aggressive railways that then
Okay.
turned into more something that resembles like a roller coaster as we think of it today, and then eventually like the actual like modern roller coasters that we have. So there's that history, but there's also like the artistic history of trying to tell story through landscape and environment design. And depending on how you conceptualize it, you can go back to the pleasure gardens that people were designing in Europe in I'm going to get the years wrong, but say the 1700s.
Would that be
And
like Versailles, like the
yeah,
Garden
like
of Versailles?
Versailles. Versailles is a very sort of manicured and intentional approach to that, very geometric and sort of showing man's dominance over nature. But there's also like the English pleasure gardens, which were intentionally designed so that you didn't even like you hopefully wouldn't know that someone designed it, and it just was like perfectly picturesque and trying to like
Ooh.
and you can sort of see the theme emerging there too, where clearly one of those gardens is designed to showcase the man's power over nature, and the other one's sort of like this is the beauty of nature, and like nature is so much better than us as humans, and those kind of messages. So that was a form of entertainment and environment design to tell that story. But it keeps going back further throughout history. People love to point to cathedrals and mosques and any sort of temple. You could talk about the pyramids, right? These are spaces that are designed to take you into them and create an emotional reaction, right? And whether that's a sense of reverence or awe or sort of honoring the might of the ruler who that temple it was commissioned for, they all have that same effect of like they want to take you to a different place and they want to like completely control your experience in a 360 degree way and put you into that story. And the difference is a cathedral is trying to put you into the story of the church and trying to express the power of God and reverence. I would love to see a Greek god themed attraction, but there's superheroes or your characters from your favorite animated movie or whatever, but they're still trying to like tell a story through the environment. And when you go to the things like cathedrals and temples and any sort of ancient monument, like they're all using the same techniques too. There's actual sculpture, there's architecture, if you think about things like incense, there's still smell, there's scenic painting with murals on
Crazy.
the wall and stained glass. There's specific examples of specific temples and other institutions like that using like illusions and illusory painting. So the same way that you might paint a set these days to make it look like it's stone or make it look like there's like a hallway or something on stage, same thing happens in those old buildings. There's a church which I will not remember the name of, but the whole back nave of the church is just painted, but it's like done in perfect perspective, and
Oh my
it makes
God.
makes you feel like that you're in a bigger building than you actually are. And so people have been trying to tell stories through environments for a really, really long time. And theme parks and increasingly things like immersive theater are only really like the sort of modern manifestation of that, where we have more technology and we have the ability to like craft those experiences in a much more sort of second by second way that's very precise. And we have all these sort of engineering tools at our disposal to create more impressive and more believable illusions. But at the end of the day, you're kind of doing the same thing. You're trying, I think the best theme attractions put you in that same headspace. They're putting you in a space where you're feeling awe, you're feeling transported, you're feeling something bigger than like you would normally experience in everyday life.
Wow. I feel inspired to go make something, even though I have no abilities like that. But you did get me thinking with like you're feeling transported. I feel like that's what when you see like an ad for an immersive experience, it's about like you're being transported to that place, but then it just turns out to be like a projection room or something.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, there's the word immersive in particular is vastly overused right now. It's become pretty much meaningless. I can't remember. It's a couple years back. I was like reading a press release about a restaurant, and they were talking about how immersive their menu was. And it was like, what? Where have we gone? Where have we gone astray? And so, like, yeah, immersive has become as much of a marketing term as it's become like an actual describer of an experience, and I think it's a shame, but it's kind of happens at least in theme entertainment. It happens all the time. Before immersive, it was story, and story became like this like overused term that people stopped understanding, and it was just like here's like a 5-page backstory of why a merry-go-round exists, and people can get very heavy-handed with it, but it usually comes around. And I think the important thing to always like keep your eye on is that emotion of it and the angle. The angle is trying to put you into a different space, different headspace, really, in a different emotional state. And that to me, that's what immersiveness is. It's not so much about like how realistic is the door trim. It's did I forget about everything else and was I fully in this moment? And like feeling that sense of awe and wonder that like the best attractions really like capture.
that's why we love going to theme parks. Because
Yeah, I mean, there's a
I don't
lot of
want to
reasons
deal
I
with
think people like
modern
going
life.
to theme
I
parks.
want to deal with magic.
Yeah, I think one of the really great things about theme parks, specifically as they're built now, is they fuse two things that we are lacking in life. On the one hand, we don't really have lots of moments of awe and wonder in our life, and specifically in America, we also don't really have like walkable communities
I
and
was just thinking walkable cities.
yeah, and we don't have necessarily like third spaces just to like hang out with our friends. And so like the theme park takes these two things that we have like have historically been, part of human civilization as far back as you can go, and things that we're both lacking a lot in modern life, and it puts them in the same space. And that's so not only can you hang out with your friends and walk around this like great environment and have like yummy food, but then you can also have like this like 10-minute, like experience of wonder and magic and awe and that sort of like that religious sense of something bigger than yourself. And then you're back out to hanging with your friends, and now you have something to talk about in the experience you just went through. And I think that is one of the reasons why I think people like them so much.
Yeah, I feel like Disney adults, I don't know if there's a universal equivalent of like the Disney adult, but I feel like they get a really bad rap when, like, as you're saying, it's people who just like, maybe they're obsessed with something particular, but like, I feel like it's just a lot of people who love, yeah, experiencing wonder, awe, some kind of excitement in like a really nice location that you can actually go to and it's not going to close at 5 p.m. And then you're like, well, now what? Like you have a whole day to do whatever, somewhere fun.
One of the things we were talking about before we started this was was sort of related to the Disney adult thing, and but the sort of the criticism that theme parks get, and I think there are valid criticisms out there that we can probably talk about in terms of all the ethics of theme parks and charging and all that stuff. But the thing that drives me a bit crazy is when theme parks get criticized as being fake. There's a lot of scholarship and particularly like just hand wringing about people enjoying these like artificial environments and like going to like fake Paris instead of real Paris and like not being cultured. Actually, that yellow book right there is a whole bunch of criticism in that vein. And like it drives me a bit crazy because I think it drastically just misses the point, right? Like I don't think I've ever heard of anyone going to see a Shakespeare play complaining about the artificiality of it.
I mean, we're
Theater,
not at the Globe
fine.
Theater right now. We're on Broadway. Yeah.
Yeah, like a theater is entirely artificial. Like what you think those are real stone columns and real kings. Like like it's no different for theme parks. Like yes, the castle is made out of fiberglass. Why does that matter? Why does that matter? And at the same token, I don't think anyone like thinks that a theme park version of a country or a culture is substituting for the real thing, right? They're there for storytelling purposes, and
Right.
you know if you have a story that takes place in Paris, you might build Paris instead of shooting it on location. And I don't think it's any different for theme parks. And like there, I mean, I think there's the criticism there to perhaps like in the vein of like portraying cultures in ways that aren't accurate. I think theme parks have a long history of that, particularly when you talk about various nations that aren't Europe and you know, tend to be where people of color have historically been oppressed. But in terms of just the actual act of putting a different place in a different location, like it yes, they are fake. That's the whole point. It's storytelling and it's art, and that part gets me a little bit crazy. Goes is just incensing, and
Yeah, I
it's
guess.
frustrating that we're in 2025 and that still ends up being like the primary criticism when there's plenty of other things to criticize.
Yeah, I guess I don't really think about that except like I'll comment on like a plant sometimes, like even at a zoo or some random wherever I am, and my mom really knows plants, and she's like, "Well, that's fake." And it's like, okay, I still liked it. Sue me, like I still liked the plant.
Yeah, I mean it's very few things in art are what they are, and that's I mean it's part of the magic of it, right? Like when you go to see a magic show, you know that they're actually making the ball disappear or like the person levitate. But sorry, that's a spoiler to you. And I think it's the same thing with theme parks. It's like okay, we know that floating mountains don't exist, and we know that I'm not actually in Paris. But
Yeah.
the fact that someone has been able to create this and give me the illusion that I'm there and make a different version of that place that's like more interesting or sort of more theatrical than the real thing. Like that is sort of like the what makes it impressive is the fact that you know someone has built this and you know someone has gone through the trouble to design every single thing. And I think that's at least for me, that's
Right,
one of
that's
the
what
things
I'm paying for.
yeah, one of the things that makes it so impressive is the fact that this didn't exist and someone has created the illusion of it existing.
To speak about myself, when I went to Hobbiton like earlier in the year, I was blown away by all the details like on the doors that you like never even see that close in the movie. But like they want to make sure that if it got to be there, like there's like laundry hanging and it's not just like one shirt. There's like a one sock. Like it looks so realistic. And the fact that like somebody, some person, or probably a team, like went through and made sure that everything was there so it looked like a lived in place. It's really impressive because otherwise I feel like it looks just like an empty sort of Sims house where you know no one lives there, but there's like one bed and a chair and it just gives the impression of life.
That's sort of it goes back to the idea of story and in theme. It's like well, whoever your character is, or whatever the theme of the movie or movie is, and or in the case of a theme park, whatever the theme is there, like the story helps to populate that world. You don't just end up with, you know, a random room in some random person's house. It's a specific person's house who has specific, you know, characteristics about them that ideally play into the theme of the overall story. If I mean, Animal Kingdom does this really, really well, where the entire park has multiple themes. One of them is sort of the intrinsic value of nature and how that plays out in the individual environments you go to and sort of what textures are prioritized and who the characters are and like what they're doing or what they're not doing that sort of that emphasizes the idea that nature is important. And like the best theme parks are always doing that and the best movie sets or the best theatricals, they're always doing that same thing. It's like taking that story and then imbuing it into every single aspect of a physical environment, which is not really a thing we necessarily see in modern architecture anymore or modern environmental design. I think that's one of the reasons why it resonates with people so much. We were talking about the history of theme park design earlier, but I mean, the entire discipline of just environment design in general throughout history, architecture has always, up until, you know, the mid 20th century, was always very heavy on narrative and symbolism. We went to the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles together. And if you just look around that building, like every facet of that building is like specifically emphasizing, like through symbols and architecture, like the importance of history and the natural world and science and
It was
academia and all these
beautiful.
kind of things. And like it's not just, you know, as much as like modern architecture can be really pretty with like a big glass box and like maybe there's like something
I'm
about the
actually so
gesture.
sick of the glass box thing. I'm sick of
Yeah,
it.
well, I mean, like everything, there's bad examples of narrative-based architecture too. But typically modern architecture tends to focus on a very, very macro scale, that kind of symbolism. Like maybe if I think about like the Lucas Museum of Art, there is like a spaceshipy like gesture to that building that like relates to probably some sort of concept around narrative, but it's a lot more abstract and a lot more subtle and not imbued into every single sense, every single spot, part of the architecture or in the environment in the way that traditional architecture has. But all that stuff that used to be on traditional architecture moved into theater and moved into theme parks, and that's where we still see it. And I think it's an amazing way to tell a story and to make people feel like they're like fully just a way
Yeah.
to communicate ideas.
I do fear when it comes to like theater in a way that we're like leaving like if it's not all from physical sets, but like there was a lot more like screen usage
Mhm.
on stage and even in theme parks, I feel like they're doing more
Oh
with
yeah,
screens
great
or
screens
3D
are a huge
glasses
topic.
and we both work with screens, big screens, and I'm not a screen hater by any means. But I do wonder if it's going to be kind of like a pendulum swing, like it's going to go like super screeny, and then people are going to like rage against it, and it's going to kind of find a nice happy
Yeah,
medium.
and I think you're already seeing that. I think especially throughout the 2010s, there was a massive emphasis on screens. And I think there was a kind of a confluence of CGI becoming relatively affordable for productions and like projection technology getting really, really good. And like the desire to make attractions that were very, very sort of more movie-like in the sense that you have something happening every single second. There's like constant action compared to like older attractions, which are the the older the attraction gets, the more static it is, and the more it's kind of like going
Right.
through a living wax museum, which is something that I really like, but a lot of people don't think is relevant anymore. And so screens are kind of like a natural way to do it. It's also like, arguably it's cheaper and easier to maintain something that is a projector and a screen versus, a massive set with tons of animatronics and that kind of thing. I think we see this with almost any technology. There's always kind of a pendulum swing. And people, just the same way that in the movie side, people got very, very enamored with like, gratuitous CGI uh,
Yeah.
for a while. And we started to see like a little bit of a pullback from that into sort of recognizing that CGI is a tool that is good for some things and not good for others. I think it's the same way with screen technology in theme parks and in theater, where like it's really, really good for certain things, and it's even better when you use it in combination things. I think a lot of the most impressive attractions I've seen in recent years have been the ones that have managed to integrate physical sets with screens and multiple layers of screens in particular. Like so you have screens and you have like an LED panel and you have projection mapping and you have an animatronic, then you have a set, and like you combine all these things together and then you can create this sort of hyper real moment where in the same way that filmmaking you might have a CGI background and a live action foreground, or maybe like someone's like, head is live action, but their body is CG. Like you get these really cool fusions of techniques that ultimately, because your goal is to try to bring that illusion to life, whatever that illusion is or whatever that place is.
Right.
And the using it as a tool rather than using it as the sole thing, I think is when it's best. And I think we're on the theme entertainment side. I think we're moving towards that world. I think people have finally sort of got over the excitement of like, oh, we can like completely put people into like a big bubble, and
Yeah.
we're starting to think about how you can use that technology as a tool to help augment an overall scenic design.
Which I am happy about because I have been on one too many rides that were all so much screen, and I felt so sick afterwards that I took value out of my day and had to sit on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for that too on the accessibility front, and a lot of people get motion sick, and screens are kind of notorious for that. It's just because it it's an execution thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but if what you're seeing on a screen doesn't match what your body is feeling, it can make you really, really ill. I mean, VR has that problem where like if you're in a VR headset and like someone starts like transporting you like on like a conveyor belt or something, suddenly you like feel very disoriented. And it's the same thing in theme parks, and not the programming of the ride vehicle and the media doesn't always match up. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes it's just because the creative of what the experience is supposed to be, the ride system can't do, but you still want to
Right.
make the media do that thing. And there's sometimes it's like an actual hardware issue. There's all sorts of reasons why that might happen, but it is one of the big drawbacks of relying entirely on that kind of technology.
Wow. I feel like what you just said, I could start like another 100 conversations off of, but I know we are wrapping up soon. So I had sent over Kira the questions that you guys very nicely submitted here on Instagram, and I'm gonna let Kira pick which questions
Oh boy,
she
I'm gonna
wants
have to.
to
I think
answer.
you could try to do a lightning round.
Okay, lightning round. What is the most annoying thing for guests to do?
So my answer as someone who like really values the design of these things, it's people that abuse the parks and just climb on things that are clearly not to be climbed on, peel at paint on the wall when they're waiting there. It is amazing how much destruction guests can do in a short period of time. And there's a lot of money and a lot of effort and a lot of passion that goes into making these things, and it sucks to see them destroyed. And it's also why we can't have nice things. And so if people did less of that, we could have cooler things
You heard it here, folks. Don't destroy. All right, what are your top three theme parks around the world at this time?
at this time. Efteling, number one. Disneyland Park specifically, number two. Number three, I would probably pick Animal Kingdom. That
That's it.
being said, I recently went to Epic. It was amazing. And I have not been to the Tokyo Disney Sea, which I expect I will adore.
All right, so we got a tentative top three. What is your favorite theme park food?
I'm gonna give you two answers to this one. Like in terms of just like snacks and like on the go, a pineapple vanilla swirl Dole Whip
That is so
absolutely
specific.
is very specific and it is the best thing ever. In terms of like actual like meals, Tiffin's at Animal Kingdom is really good. It's expensive, but it's really good.
Okay, I'm gonna mentally make a note of that. Now, this is probably like a crazy answer, but how long on average does it take to develop a new ride?
That's actually a really good question. I mean, it's going to depend on the scale of the ride and like the kind of park you're dealing with. I think smaller parks can, like a carnival can, buy a portable ride and get it set up within probably a few months. And then like a smaller park, maybe like a year or two to get like a basic coaster installed. But when you're talking about like really big attractions, you're typically talking 3 to 6 years in terms of a development cycle. There's the whole like pitching process and like the actual design of it, and then there's actual construction. And so it can take a long time.
Any theme park hacks? These can be for a specific park or just theme parking in general.
I would say that at least at most parks, ice water is free, and you should take advantage of it.
Oh,
You
so not a
can
water bottle,
most
but
theme parks,
like,
you can go to like any restaurant that has like a fountain and just
uh-huh.
ask for a cup of water, and they will just give it to you.
That is good to know. What makes a roller coaster a roller coaster?
It rolls and it coasts. I think that is a great philosophical debate you could probably have for like an hour. I think the general, at least from where I'm coming from, a roller coaster really needs to be a ride that is on a track that is like primarily getting its thrill through like gravity maneuvers that are and it's not if it's going at a constant pace or like it's powered the entire time, it's hard for me to consider it a roller coaster. Although there is ambiguity there. There are like powered roller coasters out there. But I think in general that's where sort of I would draw the line. If it's mostly gravity, then I would call it a roller coaster.
Okay, speaking of roller coasters, could you get stuck upside down?
Yes, very unlikely, but it does happen.
You mean
Uh,
gravity doesn't save you somehow?
Well, I mean, it's a physics thing, right? And so, like, if you are unlucky enough that your car like doesn't have the right momentum to fully like make it over the loop, and it just happens to stall at the right point, then it's like perfectly balanced, then you can get stuck there.
Oh my God. Oh my
It
God.
is completely safe. There
Right, I mean,
are
you're secured. You're
Yeah,
just
you're secure in a very secure seat, and there are plans to evacuate you, and you will get evacuated. It's not gonna be fun though. It's gonna be very uncomfortable.
wow. Okay, reasons to not go on upside down roller coasters. And this one, I actually came up with this question. Is there an ideal line length? And I was thinking of this question in terms of like crowd management.
Are you talking about like physical, like a line is like 1,000 feet, or are you talking about like wait
I mean,
time?
amounts of, yeah, I meant like wait time. Like,
Mhm.
how many people do you really want to have like waiting? Because there's sometimes I go on a ride and there's like no wait. And actually, if I do too many rides with no wait, if it's like a thrill ride, I start feeling sick. And it feels like this was not designed for me to go nonstop ride, 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 ride.
Yeah, I think there is a ideal length. I couldn't tell you what it is. But I do think, I mean, I think there's some research to support this too, that like people don't really enjoy, aren't completely happy when a park is like fully empty and they can actually be a little creeped out by it. And I think even if you're not experiencing that, I think um, like if there's not enough people in a line, particularly if you're in like a themed line that has a lot of stuff to look at, like you're just plowing through and there's not actually enough time to
Yeah,
actually
and
have
then you're
a
like, "Oh,
historian.
wait, what happened?" Yeah.
But that being said, no one really likes standing in one spot for a long time and waiting, 2 hours to get on an attraction. So yes, there is an ideal length. I don't know what it is. It's probably like 15, 20 minutes, something like that. But I think maybe it also depends on the ride a little bit. Like 15 minutes waiting in like a hyper immersive queue is very different than, 15 minutes in 100-degree weather in a switchback.
Yeah, yeah. No, nothing's worse than when you think you're almost there and there's like the hidden line section that you didn't know.
Yeah.
That when I first found one of those like Harry Potter World, that was devastating for me. Well, thank you so much again for coming onto the channel. And maybe if you guys really like the video, we can have Kira back.
Yeah,
Your
I'd love to be back anytime. I can talk your ear off about theme parks for a
Do
lot longer.
you have any final words of wisdom for the audience
Uh,
or words of fun?
go experience things. Whether that's immersive art or traveling or theater or I think anything in that vein, whether it's theme parks or not, is like really good for the soul. And if you can do it, whether it's a really expensive trip or whether it's just like going to like your local museum, I think all of that stuff is like really, really valuable.
Cool. And again, anyone who's interested in following Kira's exciting theme park journey, you can find her website linked down below, Theme Park Concepts. Yay! That wraps up the video. Again, thank you so much to Kira and Theme Park Concepts for coming on the channel. And if you want her to come back on the channel to talk about anything else, just let me know in the comments, engage. I'm sure she would love to come back. And I always love talking to my friends about the things that they're passionate about and that I'm also interested in because it's a win-win for everybody. With that being said, like the video if you liked it, comment down below, whatever, and don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye!